Balázs, how are you this evening?
Nice, very good, very good. Thanks, David. Nice being here.
Good. Okay, so let me just quickly tell you a bit more about Balázs. He's a dedicated birder. I mean, I've known him for a few years now. He's the director, should I say, of the Eco Tours Wildlife Holidays, which is based in Hungary. He's a Hungarian himself, and he's based just outside Budapest. I need to ask you about that in a minute. And you've traveled all over the place with your company, leading tours, Eastern Europe, West Africa, and the Americas. Balázs speaks impeccable English, much better than me, actually. And he's got a great sense of humor. I've actually done a couple of tours with Balázs in the past, and just to Slovenia, and his humor is is very funny. It's very funny. Good evening, Balázs. How are you?
Good, perfect. Good evening, David.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Can you explain where you are in the world right now? Because I know you're just outside Budapest, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a little city, I have to say, called Budakeszi, just outside of Budapest. There, I moved about 10 years ago, and thanks to the lockdown, I mean, it's just neighboring a national park. In between Budapest and us, there is a national park, and it's a beautiful, mature forest, and I always wanted to discover it. And due to the lockdown, I was kind of forced because we couldn't go anywhere else. So I found incredible things now. I'm so happy to have this opportunity. I was mentioning we just found a breeding eagle owl with a chick, and that's a big deal. I mean, in Spain, probably there are more of this species, but in Hungary, it's a pretty rare thing, especially near the capital. So it's great.
That's pretty cool. You're a gifted birder. I know that because I've been with you. And one of your specialities, which I also remember you doing, is your fantastic ability to imitate birds. And I understand that you do a very good nightjar. So I just wondered if I could put you on the spot and ask you to imitate a nightjar.
Right now?
Right now.
But we should be in the habitat, David. All right, let me try. Can you hear that?
That's amazing.
That's when they clap,
Yeah.
No,
For those who don't know, that is actually an amazing imitation of a nightjar. You should check it out. Look it up on online, because they make that lovely noise, that chirring noise, and the quick sound as well. So it's pretty incredible. I also know that you. Because when I was with you, when we did tours in Slovenia, that you were also imitating some of the woodland birds that we were coming across as well.
Black woodpecker, I'm especially good in black woodpecker and also Ural.
Okay, let's have both of them quickly.
Sorry?
Let's have both of them quickly. Eagle owl first.
Eagle owl, I always listen first. But the black woodpecker, it has different calls, but one of them is. This is one call, and then it has also this churring type of. This they love, they respond. If they are in a breeding range, I just have one breeding pair very close to my house, and they come right over your head. And you need to, keep it to a minimum, because just to lure birds for fun
it's not ethical.
No.
Can you do eagle owl?
Yeah, but eagle owl is just a woo. But that's how I found, I mean, we had in the in March 15, in downtown of the city, we had this bird calling. That's how we started to search for it. And so I was going to different mines, abandoned, mines. I call quarries, not mines.
Right.
Quarries, and I was booing the whole night. And finally, the way I found that in one place nearby, really, it's about a kilometer from here, I heard suddenly the chick begging call, this squeaky type of, I can't imitate, but it's a high-pitched squeaking call as they beg for food from the adults. So that's when I know I'm in the right place, and I was so happy. It's a big thing for us.
Well, that's fantastic. I've got some requests now. I mean, forget about questions. We've got requests here. Brian Lee's wondering if you could do Savvy's warbler.
I think that's good point. No, none of these Locustella warblers I would try, but I could try that actually. At the next chat, I will train myself, and next time I'll try Savvy.
Okay, all right. So tonight we're actually here to talk about Mongolia and your sort of knowledge of it, but you also are very travelled. And can you kind of tell us about some of the places you visit? I mean, we talked about Slovenia. Some people may not know of Slovenia, so in terms of it being a place for wildlife. So if you can just quickly run through some of the places you go to. I must say with Slovenia, it's absolutely, for me, one of the most, if not the most beautiful country in Europe, because you have these amazing mountains, and everywhere you look, it's just like a picture postcard. But better for me than Switzerland, because Switzerland's very manicured, the hills are alive with the sound of music, whereas this is more wild. And I remember you taking me to a meadow, an alpine meadow in Slovenia, and it was, grass and these really white rocks and flowers. And it was like walking through a pasture in heaven. It was like filled with butterflies. I'll never forget that. It's one of my favorite and sort of long-standing memories of Slovenia.
It is indeed. The last group I took there, I think they called it a wow country, if you remember. I don't know if it was that group, but it's every turn and twist of the road, people say, wow, you hear from the van, wow, because as you say, it's a tiny little country with incredibly few, I think there are 2 or 3 million inhabitants, very few people. They are all lovely, very kind people with good level of English and perfect infrastructure, but as you say, yet incredible wilderness. I mean, one of the most forested country in Europe, Slovenia is, and they have some mature forests. No wonder they still have like 500 to 600 bears, brown bears. They have lynx, they have wolves. We've been in this little patch of forest which holds a lot of three-toed woodpeckers. It's a beautiful, very, very peaceful country where, except the real touristy hotspots, you don't meet big crowds and people, but you see incredible wilderness. And as you say, for the pastures, it's probably one of the best area for butterfly enthusiasts. I mean, we run tours, butterfly specialized tours to Slovenia as well, and in a 10-day you easily go over 100 species, including all this Maculina species, the blues, all the highlights of European butterfly conservation, I should say. So it's a fantastic place. I would, if you want me to name another country, I would jump across Eastern Europe to the northeast of Europe, really, a country called Belarus, which used to be Russia, but now it's an independent country, and I adore this country as well for similar reasons. It's not as scenic, but it's because of the low level of agriculture, it's still pretty much preserved. Belarus holds still the largest fens and bogs in the continent. I mean, they have like endless bogs, and some very the location of the country makes it very interesting, because some of the species like azure-tit, which many people want to see, Terex sandpiper, marsh sandpiper, reaches its southern or westernmost range. So you would otherwise need to travel pretty far to see these species. You have huge population of spotted eagle, and probably the best place to see bison in the wilderness in Europe. We almost never miss them in Belarus. So it's a very wild country with some incredible highlights, and also some of the species are in huge density. I mean, you can see spotted eagle in Poland if you really try, but here, I mean, if you go into the right habitat, everywhere they are everywhere. Or cycrine wagtails, azure-tit, as I said, great gray owl, lot of fantastic all the European woodpeckers you can see in a 9 or 10 day tour, and so it's pretty nice. And in the last, I think we are running tours for 7 years now. When we began, when we started to do tours, the infrastructure was just the opposite, and the culture of tourism was just the opposite of Slovenia or what we are used to in Western countries. I mean, we were with the guides, and with the local guides, we were delivering the coffee and the milk, and the waitresses were looking at us. Why? What are we doing? Because you ordered the coffee, you waited for 20 minutes, and you asked for milk, and then you waited another 20 minutes. So it was a nightmare scenario for any guide who doesn't only want to show birds, but want to make a real good holiday. But now they really, I think they catch up and they understand what means looking after clients. I mean, it's a time travel in this sense. You can still see communism from a safe distance, if you want to put it this way, because it's a funny political situation, and you can appreciate the impact of this on people, positive and negative. Actually, it's not only negative. Yeah, I think Slovenia and Belarus is probably amongst the highlights of this region. And then we could go to Georgia, Armenia, so many places, or the Danube Delta, the second biggest reed bed in the world, in the entire planet, which is you can penetrate only on boat. So we are using for our holidays, we are using a houseboat, a 4-star houseboat, where you travel, in which you travel 3 days in the middle of nowhere, basically. So you go to sleep with the core of the frogs, thousands of them. And the first thing, you go in the morning, it has a observation deck on the top floor, 360 degrees, and you see this aerial ballet of pelicans and white-tailed eagles and glossy ibises and tons of birds. It's a really amazing place. And of course, if you are in Romania, you go to the Carpathian Mountains to watch bears. Lots of good stuff. I would say these countries, Romania, Bulgaria, and then Belarus and Slovenia, if you want to visit. If you have been to Hungary, because Hungary is a must, of course.
Okay. Well, what I need to do now is get back to this. And okay, well, that's really a nice background into some of the countries in Europe that you love going to. But can we now learn a bit more about Mongolia? Because, as I say, Mongolia is a country which is very mystical. I just think of people riding horses and massive planes with golden eagles on their arms and stuff like that. So can you just tell us all about Mongolia?
Yeah, sure. It's I think it's it's a very, very special place. I mean, I did travel to some distant corners of the planet, but you rarely have the opportunity to really experience true wilderness as it probably have been for thousands of years. And when you arrive to Mongolia, you arrive to a small but pretty modern airport. And if you are in the city, you will see a quickly developing capital. But immediately as you leave the capital, you will get shocked about the distances, the space, the enormity. I mean, we are talking about a country the size of Spain, France, and Germany together, with 6 million people as total inhabitants. So imagine Spain, France, and Germany together, and only 6 million people. So that gives you an idea. The further you go, and 2 million out of this lives in the capital. So you remain with 4 million people, with basically a whole continent for them. And obviously there are some clusters, to put it this way, of people, but some of the places, for example, the area of the Altai mountain in the west of the country where we go to see the snow leopard, or in the south, in the Gobi Desert, which is the second biggest desert of the planet, you drive basically 500 kilometers and you meet like very, very few people, maybe 4 or 5 or maximum 10 vehicles. So it's a very rewarding place for someone who is interested in wilderness. And it used to be challenging logistically. And I must say now, because many of you might be thinking, oh, it must be wonderful, but it's not for me. I like to eat proper food and like to sleep in proper place, and I like to be safe. And I can assure you that we have now taken, in the last, I think, 6 years, we are running several tours for major UK companies, and they are all, basically, they're surprised about the level, the quality of comfort, even in the most remote areas. So it's exciting. And if you think it's only desert or only grasslands, I have to say there are pretty many very different habitats you can go to. The northern part of the country still have a lot of Siberian taiga forest, where we look for Siberian ruby throat, for example, which is one of the highlights, or Hume's leaf warbler, and of course the chipmunks and different mammals. Then you have this incredible alkaline steppe lakes full of shorebirds and wildfowl. And then you go up to the arid, very arid areas and dry, the Gobi Altai, which is the desert and the mountains together. Maybe I can try to show some photos now. Is this the right time? Should I try?
Yeah, let's try. It'd be really good to see some images of what you speak of.
I mean, let's see some of the. I will share my screen. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
All right, these are random photos, so I will just talk through, because the wildlife photos are mixed with cultural and landscape slides, as you can see. Mongolia has a Buddhist heritage, shamanic and Buddhist heritage. It's spiritually, it's also a very interesting place. That's Hustai National Park, the forest steppe, as they call it, although you see very little forest, but nevertheless, the habitat is called forest steppes. And of course, the traditional. Is the sound disturbing? Sorry, my daughter in the background.
It's fine. That's fine.
That's not from the. Yeah, and then you are in the desert, which is, it's a rocky desert, as you can see, and on the horizon you already see the stretches, the foothills of the Altai mountain, which is coming through. I mean, it's from China, Mongolia, and Russia. That's the home, one of the main target species we go for, the snow leopard. And lot of highlight birds, but it's not only about birds, because basically in any area you visit, you will be always surrounded with little furry things. So if you're not just into birds, but you like mammals, you will see another 30-40 species of things. This is I think it's a Pallas's pica. Another highlight is the Przewalski horse, which is a fantastic story, conservation story. I don't know if you're aware of the.
Tell us the story.
Basically, it's the only wild horse species of the planet, and they have disappeared from the wild in 1968. The last animal was seen. Hold, give me a second. I have to reduce the volume. They disappeared from the wild in 1968. The last one was seen in China, and there was only some remaining animals in zoos, in different zoo parks around the world. And so they reintroduced them from zoos, and it's a success story. I mean, once they roam through Eurasia, even in Hungary, we have skeletons of Przewalski horse. Przewalski was, by the way, about the name, he was a very funny gentleman. He was a spy, a Russian spy, I think. And during his spy adventures, he was discovering nature. He was a naturalist as well, and I think he was the one who described this horse the first time.
So he was spying people as well as animals.
Basically, his duty was to spy on animals, and I think he did it pretty well. So they allowed him to discover and describe some species for science, you know. Anyway, so in the Mongolian Big Five tour, this is one of the five animals. They're just awesome. They're beautiful animals. They now multiply in good numbers. They have a strong population in several spots of Mongolia. And well, going back to the comfort aspect, this is one of the yurt or gers, as they call it in Mongolia. We have a camp built for us basically in an altitude of 1,800 meters. And I have to stretch this because many people who want to see snow leopard immediately think, oh, must be beautiful, but I will never do that because I have to climb very high. I have to climb in rocky, uneven terrain and get acclimatized to the high mountains and sleep in the snow and shower in a mountain stream of 5 degrees, etc. And this tour is designed exactly the opposite way. I mean, it's just, I mean, as you saw, you sleep in bed. We have created this yurt camp in top of the mountain, very close to the habitat where we go and search for the cat. You have a whole crew looking after you, cooking perfect breakfast and dinners. And we have running hot water every morning and every night. So it's bearing in mind the area we are and the species we are looking for. I must say it's a luxury thing, and that's how you get with Japanese 4-wheel drives. We get to the place to the observation point. So there is basically no climbing or often not even walking involved. Yeah, so that's another observation point. You have your beer, your armchair. So it's armchair view of the cats. And as you can see, this is probably the highest place we go during the tour. It's about 2,200 meters. So no need to, to get, even people with different blood pressure conditions can easily go up there. It's a separate gear or yurt for dining. That's where we are served. And these are some of the vehicles we use when in the lowlands. And that's another aspect, the wonderful terrain, I think, to watch birds. We usually use 4 or 5, depending on the number of people, vehicles, so it's really not crowded. We are 2 or maximum 3 clients in a van, so basically window seat for everyone, to put it this way.
Which will be good actually in the future with social distancing.
Right, it would even work because I mean, it's very dry. Usually the air is super dry and you can open the window. So it's, even from epidemiological point of view, it's pretty good. Yeah, that's how the observation of snow leopards, you can imagine. So as you can see, we have all the gear here, and you didn't need, the cars are just behind from where the photo was taken. And then during the midday, you can have a little rest, read your book in front of your own yurt. Now, these are just ideas to give you an idea of what to imagine in a tour. Again, the desert and the mountains. One of the funniest program everybody is looking forward to is the night walks for gerbils. You know, this little jumping kangaroo type of animals with long tails, very funny tails. And when it's strong wind, which often happens in Mongolia, they like to shelter in, you know, behind anything that they can find. So that's what happens. This animal just approaches you by itself. Bar-headed goose are another highlight. That's a almost aerial view of the youth camp. It gives you an idea of where the running hot water is. Incredible. I mean, you hear wolves howling sometimes, and one of the spectacle for me is when, you know, the day is over and you just come out after dinner, you come out and lay on your back and watch the sky. Is something undescribable. I mean, there are in Europe some areas where the light pollution is low and you can really appreciate the sky and the many stars, but it's nothing. It's absolutely uncomparable. It's like, I don't know, it's, if you see the Star Wars, you know, it's like this. Here is 3D, it has depth, you feel in space. It's so shiny and so clean, having probably no settlement in a 200-kilometer radius. Incredible. Amur falcon, another highlight of the tour, very similar to the European red-footed falcon. Another member of the Big Five, the Mongolian Big Five, is called Argali sheep. It's the largest wild sheep of the planet, strictly protected and also endangered from overgrazing, which is one of the problems in Mongolia. Again, another gem, I must say. It's azurite. Every tour we see them, just in Ulaanbaatar, basically around the river in the city. In some areas, probably the commonest raptor is Lammergeier. I mean, the number again is just mind-blowing. It gives you an idea about the amount of prey available for them and the situation of nature. Brown accenter, another beautiful species.
And this, sorry, going back to the brown accentor, just for those who don't realize, that is actually the same family as the dunnock. And our dunnock in the UK is also called the hedge accentor.
Right. There is an almost endemic accenter to Mongolia. I didn't include it in the pictures because it's just brown. It's not, I mean, this one is much more beautiful, but if you are looking for really rare species, which is hard to see elsewhere, Kozlov's accenter is also common on our tours. Again, a situation that's the mountain chef actually during watching snow leopard meanwhile. So I thought to include this to further emphasize. And this is now the Altai Mountains, obviously.
Just a quick question for you, Balázs, from Brian Lee. Do you get Siberian accentor?
No, only on migration. I think they go through in end of September, and to be in Mongolian end of September is a game you do not want to play necessarily, because anytime snowfall might, it's getting very chilly, and in the mountains you get a snowfall, and even in August you can get, but it usually quickly melts. So the last tours we have there is, I think, beginning of September, maximum latest mid-September, and they come later.
What sort of temperature are we talking about during this particular tour, for example?
20 to, typically during the day, 20 to 25, maybe even warmer sometimes. Up in the mountains, it's pretty nice. It's 20 degrees, I would say. And as you go down to the desert, it can be pretty warm. It's 25, even 28. Very dry, so it's not humid at all. I mean, Mongolia, as you know, it's extreme continental climate. So in the winter, it's normally steady minus 40 degrees, 30, 40 degrees. So it's it's not for the faint-hearted. I did that once. I went there in January to try housing. It was only minus 24.
Only.
So up in the mountain is completely pleasant and very little chance of rain. It's complete, no bugs. Very few places have any insects that gives you a burden. So it's a rather comfortable thing. This is again Hustai National Park, and some of the incredible rock formation with Mongolian gazelles on the front. I mean, this time of the year you see small groups of them, but one of the biggest wildlife spectacle of East Asia is their huge migration, where hundreds of thousands of those gather and crossing the Gobi Desert and basically all of East Asia. Godlevsky's bunting, probably close to our rock bunting. Another highlight everybody wants to see, a very funny Henderson ground jay. It's in the rocky slopes near the Altai, on the sides of the Altai mountains, just before you reach the desert, and they are incredibly fast, running off different bugs and spiders, and very funny animals, very nice. That is obviously in the desert. It's an animal called toad-headed agama, posing nicely for a photo. And then you have this typical riverine forest, riparian forest, where you search for a lot of migrants and also Philoscopus warblers. Again, another jerboa. Oh yes, and the sparrow. It's called the Saxon Sparrow. Very funny name. The Saxon forest is again how you call a euphemism. I don't know if I pronounce well. The Saxon tree, I don't know if I included a photo, is a tiny little tree. It's hardly taller than a man, and but it has this very nicely shaped barks and trunks. And that's where you find the Saxon sparrow, usually breeding in Upland Buzzard nest like this one. Very local, this bird.
Very pretty sparrow.
Beautiful, beautiful. And again, another variety you have, that's the famous Hungarian elves, the biggest sand dunes in Mongolia. And again, in the photo you cannot appreciate behind you, behind where the photo is taken, is the arid, dry, rocky desert. The cars are stopped in a small oasis where every morning thousands of birds are coming to drink, including Pallas's sand grouses. So the air is filled with their chirping, beautiful call. Then you have the desert, the sand desert, and if we were in a higher point, where we are sometimes, the youth camp is, you see behind the high mountains of the Altai. So you have strips of completely strikingly different habitats. Again, it's a mind-blowing scene. I think I will have some photos that will give you an idea. Here you have the mountains behind the sand dunes. Yeah, that's already 3 different kind of. Well, on the tour, we also find Guldenstadt redstart. That's a Dorian redstart, very common. Guldenstadt redstart obviously is a much more rare species, and you have to go pretty high up in the mountains to see them. Sacred falcon, if you have been to Hungary, you've probably seen them, but I especially like to show this particular photo because compared to ours, they are much more stronger and much more, I don't know, they are much closer to deer. And actually, there is a study going into trying to find out if there was a kind of interbreeding in deer falcon naturally occurring in Mongolia from the north, and then the sacred falcon, which, because some of the birds are almost white, this one is very, very strongly built, just on the roadside. This is another yurt from within, from inside. Some of them are as beautifully decorated as this one. Mongolian finch, another beautiful species we always look for. Sometimes, some years they are very difficult to find, but mostly we find them around the breeding site or where they come to drink in the oasis. This photo was taken from the Altai yurt camp, the snow leopard camp last year. Again, Mongolian gazelles, more pikas. And then here, I must say, only one group out of the 15 groups we had in the last few years, I think, have seen them like this. This is a photo of a tour participant. They were like 5 minutes from the camp. Usually we see them from much, much bigger distance. However, the observations of snow leopards usually last for at least half a day. Normally, we spend the whole day with them because, you know, during the day, they are pretty inactive. You know, they're preening, laying down, playing with each other. Sometimes they are very opportunistic, like big cats. You know, if there is a marmot nearby, they say, why not to catch it? So we often see them catching marmots in front of our eyes. But usually they are pretty chilled out, laying down, preening, and we have a lot of time to watch for them. And meanwhile, you have always a lot of things happening around you. So it's
How
never,
big are they? How big is that? How big is that snow leopard?
I think, similar size to leopards in Africa. I mean, what is typical or obvious is that their tail is longer and much more bushier. You can see on YouTube some of the craziest footage as they hunt. You know, they sometimes they really run down slope, even fall 20, 30, 40 meters on the rock, and they use their tail to, you know, to balance. And the skeleton is incredibly elastic. So there are some really mind-blowing footage on YouTube. I suggest for those who get enthusiastic for this species to see, because you would think any animal falling like this much would not survive, and yet they stand up after a huge fall on a rock, from a rock, and continue hunting or walking by. It's incredible. So yeah, I don't want to take away the mysticism of snow leopards because it's on the list for many people, but I must say we are about 96-90% success rate. We have a method with which I think we pretty much sorted out in the last years, where usually we arrive to the Altai mountains, and within 2 to 3 days we have good observation.
Wow.
The first ones, and sometimes we are treated with another. You are wondering, what is this strange looking beast? This is called the Balázs cat. Mr. Balázs was another naturalist from Germany, actually, who, and many species, as you will note, especially if you travel to East Asia, you will take note of how active he was. You will find Balázs cat, Balázs grasshopper warbler, Balázs grouse, Balázs fish eagle. There are, just to name a few. He was a great scientist and naturalist, and Balázs cat is the closest to our wild cats, but that's how they look in the desert, in rocky outcrops, where they usually hunt for brand's wool. And they have this pretty quadratic, I don't know, in this photo you can see, but a very funny shaped head they have.
Yeah, it's kind of flattened. The heads are really weird looking flattened heads.
Exactly, yeah. Mongolian lark, a huge lark compared to other larks. Really nice.
Yeah, they're about the size of a blackbird, aren't they? They're pretty big.
Yeah. Maybe even kind of strongly built somehow. Siberian ruby throat, breeding, and depending on the timing of the tour, you see them either on migration still or in the breeding ground or both. Sometimes they overlap. Absolutely stunning bird. Yes, it's another must see in Mongolia. I think it's the best place to see oriental plover in the breeding ground. And it's really a task, you know. They live in the most dry desert of the Gobi, and so you have to drive hundreds of kilometers and scan for the distance. In May, June, they have this very funny looking stiff winged display flight, and that's how you spot them, not on the ground, because you have to really scan for miles and miles until you spot. And once you have them where they display, you usually find them pretty easily. Amazingly beautiful birds. Several species of cranes occur, and probably the nicest and surely the largest is the white-naped crane, which is a strictly and very endangered species. Beautiful animal. I think at least 2 times the size of our common crane. Very massively built. You don't have a comparison here, but they are beautiful big birds. As I mentioned, Pallas's sand grouse.
That's one bird I'd love to see, actually. I've always wanted to see. In England, it's unbelievable, but even though this species is basically found out in Mongolia and further east, I suppose, they've actually bred in England in the late 1800s. There was a massive interruption of them because they tend to kind of suddenly disperse, don't they, westwards. And they even bred they're bred in London in a place called Kingsbury.
Right. Also in Hungary.
Sorry?
Yeah, also in Hungary. I think the same year, it must have been the same year, end of the 19th century.
Yeah, it's incredible.
There were some influx to Europe since then, but yeah, they can sometimes do that. Suddenly they appear in Western Europe in big numbers, and then a few days later they disappear. Sometimes they remain to bred, yeah. You know how the speciality of sand grouse is that they usually breed deep in the desert. And once they have a spot where they find water, they come every morning and every evening they come to drink, and they have a very special method of bringing water to their chicks. They keep droplets within the feathers. So they have a method, and you can sometimes see them as it seems like they are taking a bath, which probably is the case, but especially added to this, they hold droplets of water within the feathers, which they then bring and fly back in the middle of the desert and give drink to the tiny chicks, which are on the ground, and it can be very hot during the day. You can imagine.
Did I tell you, Balázs, that in 2017 I won the British Birdwatching Fair, Bird Brain of Britain, and my specialized subject was sand grouse of the world.
Wow.
So for 2 weeks I was the world's expert. Don't ask me now because I don't know anything anymore, but I was the world's expert for 2 weeks.
Right. So you can confirm this behavior, no? That's how they bring the water to chicks.
Yeah. Brian Lee's asking, how many species of sand grouse are there in Mongolia?
In Mongolia, only one. As at least in central, southern, and western Mongolia, only one. I will have to get back on this about eastern, which is something we start to look into. It's even more unbeaten track because even less infrastructure is in eastern Mongolia. We haven't been there yet, but as far as I'm aware, only one species of sand grouse.
And Brian, just for you, I've got a quiz for you. Don't look on Google, don't Google this, or don't look at your books, but tell me how many species of sand grouse are there in the world? Let's give me an answer at the end of this in conservation with. Okay, Brian, this is your task. Sorry, Balázs.
No, it's fine. Well, that's a photo taken by one of our local guides in March. That's basically February, March, the only time when snow leopard, male and female, is together for the mating. That's where they are pretty vocal, and then they split up, and the female is looking after the cubs. Again, another photo taken on a tour. Oh, sorry. I also brought some videos. We will have to try to probably show you some, although the photos, I think, gives pretty much the idea of.
It's gorgeous.
No, amazing animals. I mean, yeah, another highlight inhabits the same area, and actually they are the prey of snow leopard females when the cub starts to grow up and stop drinking the milk. The females start lactating and start to bring real stuff. They start with Altai snowcock. They either bring marmots or small mammals they catch, or this very sought after and huge bird, the Altai snowcock. And that's a white-winged snowfinch, something we have seen in Slovenia together, David, if you remember.
Yes.
Except that we were really running after them for half a day, and here you get out from the car and they just come to you, like 2 meters, 1 meter, they begging for food. And as I said, Mongolia is about birds and landscape and culture, but non-stop you have at least one species of furry animal to look at, and often these are the ptarmigan or Siberian marmots with their whistling call. Well, I think this is the selection of photos I brought for today. I hope it was giving you an idea of what we are dealing with, or what kind of terrain and area. And if you have any questions, or David, if you want to ask anything.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask now.
Obviously, I'm going to ask the first question. Because of mainly desert in Mongolia, Balázs, how many species would you get of in raptors, and whereas in other parts of Europe you've got many more, obviously, like the lesser spotted eagles, but because of the desert, I mean, obviously you've got the Seika and one or two other small hawks.
Well, in the let's see, let's go through quickly. I mean, the vultures, you have Himalayan griffon vulture, you have black and lammergeier, very, very, very common, all of them. Basically, these three species, maybe lammergeier in certain areas, but black vulture and black vulture you see anywhere in the country, even in Ulaanbaatar.
Yeah.
Then you have the commonest raptor probably in every camp, wherever there are humans, is white-eared kite or black kite. It's closest to black kite. Then you have, of course, kestrel, you have saker falcon, you have a moor falcon, you have then another highlight species, upland buzzard, sometimes a little bit difficult to, because they have so varied coloration, but it can be tricky to differentiate from long-legged buzzard. You have Japanese buzzard as well in certain areas, especially from the west of the country. What other raptors? Goshawk, obviously.
Are many of these migratory?
Sorry?
Are many of these migratory
No,
raptors?
not.
Are they all
The mule falcon
indigenous?
definitely, but the vultures would stay. The commonest steppe eagle, they wouldn't be there in the harsh winter for sure. Mule falcon definitely migrates, and I think saker. I mean, it's not typically migrating, but in Hungary also many of the birds leave the area and kind of nomadic. Steppe eagle, golden eagle, common.
Will you get imperial eagle?
No, not well. They have in Mongolia. We never, I think, never or maybe once we see them. Eastern imperial eagle is a rarity.
Okay, thank
Not
you.
like in
Thank
Hungary.
you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else for to have? Let's start again. Anyone else has a question for Balázs regarding this wonderful, amazing looking country? Whilst oh, go on, sorry.
Right. Yeah, it's Claire here. I was just going to ask, those photos that you had of the snow leopards, I know you said that with some of them that you managed to get very close to them. Were they all taken when you had close views, or did someone just have a massive telephoto lens?
Both, but they were very, the best photos I showed you were taken by a tour participant with a 500mm lens. But they were, I mean, this was with the scope, you probably wouldn't fit, the animal wouldn't fit in the view. I mean, they were really, really, really close. I could try to show you some of the photos. Let me stop sharing for a moment in order to not to bother you with. No, I can't. But if you allow me, David, if you go to our website, you will see some more photos of a typical observation. But this will be kind of not giving it justice from another, how to explain. I mean, this one was really lucky, this very close one. But what you see on the screen is much worse than what you see with the scope on the field. So usually they are far. But as I said, we spend them the whole day, and you have all the time of the day and the years to watch and keep appreciate them, the behavior. So yeah. And sometimes we are lucky. Sometimes we can get closer, or sometimes they come much closer.
And what time of year are most of your tours?
For snow leopards, it's July, August, and the beginning of September. Because May, June, the males are around, but the females are really kind of secretive. The cubs are still very small. They don't leave the den. So unless we know where is the den, it would be difficult. But around July and August, they start to move about, and the female often changes the den really. So they move a lot. But as I said, we have a system which is not just a random search for them. We have local scouts of the local conservation community, which we also support with our tours. And they have scouts on top of the mountain, which are just, I mean, just another story shortly, if we have still time. I have no idea how long I talk. But these guys are amazing. You know, they imagine these guys who can spot the top of the ear in 2 kilometers behind the rock, things like this. Or the other way around, we were once walking down, these two guys on the horse, the scouts who are looking for the snow leopards for us, and we are walking below them, no, just walking down, and one of them from the horse points his finger on the rock. Look, there is they leave this urinating mark, you know, the territorial, all the cats do this. And he spotted from the horse on a rock. And then you keep looking, and the same thing with the tracks. So they're just amazing. They really specialize on this. So that's how we find them.
Incredible, especially to see them for so long. You sort of imagine you might get a fleeting glimpse of one and then it's gone, but to be able to watch them for the whole day must be incredible. Thank you.
No, exactly. I mean, there is a lot of, I think with our tours in the last few years, we did manage to change a little bit for the bad or for the good, because for many people it's a very mythical, and it is still a very mythical species. It's always incredible feeling to see them, but you don't have to struggle and suffer and climb and go high and freeze to death to see them now. Definitely some of these areas we go to are pretty easy to see them, and I really hope that with our tours we can contribute to their conservation, which we always try to do.
Well, that sounds good, that we don't have to walk very far, so that, or climb either. Anyone else has anyone else got a question for Balázs at all?
Yes, if I could. Hi Balázs, how are you? All right?
Hello. I happened to realize you're here. Hello.
Hello. Of the months that you go, is one of those a better month than the other, or not really?
Well, August, I would say. Mid-August is very nice, because that's the most reliable in terms of temperature. July can be still warm, although our first tour is very last days of July and beginning of August. But I think August is fine. Most of our tours are in August. Some are in September. September can be tricky. Although something I didn't mention, which is another spectacular aspect from bird migration, and David, you will wave when I get into this, I can't stop. So you just stop me whenever. Imagine the Gobi Desert, endless rocky desert, 500 kilometers, all directions. And in the middle, you find maybe every 100 or every 50 kilometers, you find a few square meter green spot where the local people, you know, irrigate and do some vegetables, cultivate some vegetables. On migration, it's an absolute mind-blowing experience. You might go into one and find nothing, or you find in a tiny little bush, imagine a rose bush or something, you find 30 different species. The most, I mean, we found first birds for Mongolia. It's so little discovered, but these areas act really like a massive magnet for birds flying over the desert, and it's a very exciting, super exciting activity, going into a little irrigated area, a little green spot, and then you find the most odd birds you would never even think, you know, like finch in the middle of the desert, or Chinese grosbeak, or black drongo. Incredible. And a lot of PG tips, Pallas's grasshopper warblers, but lot of migrating birds.
Sounds incredible. Now, let me ask you a question, Balázs.
Yes, sir.
What is your favorite bird?
Ooh. Well, my favorite family, I would say, are geese. I love geese.
Geese.
Geese, yeah, especially red-breasted geese and lesser white fronts, which are the highlights of wintering geese in Hungary, in my own country. But generally geese, and I'm afraid you will ask me why, and I won't be able to answer, but sometimes when I manage to get very, very close to them, because in Hungary they are often hunted still, so they can be pretty easily put off. But when you manage to get close to them, a feeding flock of geese, and you see how they interact, and you hear the very silent little calls as they, you know, go on and feed, and they talk between each other nonstop. For me, it's a beautiful experience. And then find the one or different species in a flock of bean geese or greater white fronts is always exciting.
Okay, what's your favorite mammal?
Well, I think the most exciting definitely is snow leopard. I mean, now I can say I see them several times, but you know, it's always gives you goosebumps, or I don't know, short of breath, or whatever you call it. It's, mind you, yeah, brown bears also, as they appear suddenly from a deep forest, just from this area, if I have to call brown bears, I love as well.
And finally, your favorite plant?
I love busk flowers. I love busk flowers.
Okay, and if you could be anywhere in the world, not with, obviously without the COVID-19 problem, but if you could be anywhere in the world, where would you be right now?
I think that would be Tanzania, because the last bigger tour I did was Namibia, and some of my friends who did many of Africa, they said Tanzania would be something that probably beats even Namibia. That's something I really want to experience, the unexpected, the unplanned.
Okay, cool. All right, one more thing. Well, actually, two more things before we go. Firstly, Brian, have you got an answer for me?
I'd be guessing there'd probably be about anywhere around about 12 to 14. I personally have seen, I've just been writing them down. I think I've seen about 6. I've seen, most of them I've seen in Middle East. Things like Liechtenstein, spotted, pintail, black-bellied. I mean, obviously you get those in Spain, but not the Liechtenstein, obviously.
No.
But I'm not an expert on sandgrouse. So how many are there, David?
Well, firstly, I want to say I'm not an expert now either. In 2017, for 2 weeks, I was the world's expert.
Right.
And one thing I did remember is that there are 16 species around the world.
Oh, wow. Wow. There was one more question. Actually, it's not from me. It's from a friend of mine. He's actually just come back from India. But we were talking about birding in Mongolia. And he said another place, and he doesn't know whether Balázs goes there, is Kazakhstan.
Not yet, but very soon. Very, very soon, because
Right.
my childhood friend, who I started birding with, actually moved to Kazakhstan, married a wonderful Kazakh lady, and now he's back to Hungary. And we just started to chat about starting to run tours. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
funnily, if there is a bigger country than Mongolia, Kazakhstan is even bigger.
yeah.
Which is hard to imagine, but even bigger.
So you'll have to do a joint tour with David to Kazakhstan.
Absolutely.
I'll join you on that one.
Mongolia, but
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyway, brilliant presentation, Balázs. And thank you, David, for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Brian. Just to let you know, tomorrow we have Julio Delgado talking about birding in Colombia, and that starts at 7 p.m. as well. Monday, we've got Per Olstrom an amazing ornithologist from Sweden, and he'll be talking about taxonomy. Are there more hidden species to be discovered? On Tuesday, the 26th, we have this guy called Matt Young, an American scientist who specializes in finches. So he'll be talking about finches, obviously. On Wednesday, the 27th, we have the artist Harriet Mead, who makes these amazing sculptures out of wrought iron, out of iron you find in scrapyards. Amazing. So she'll be actually here, and she'll actually be knocking out a sculpture whilst we speak. Well, maybe not knocking out because that'd be quite noisy, but she'll be showing us how she makes them. On Thursday the 28th, we've got Miriam Darlington, who's a writer, nature writer, and she'll be talking about, you know, what makes her, allows her to do her stuff. And then finally on Friday the 29th, Stephen Moss, very famous nature wildlife writer, producer, BBC producer, director. He'll be here and he'll be kind of giving us an insight into nature writing. So that's what's coming up in conservation with. I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight. Thank you so much, Balázs, for giving us such an eye-opening view of Mongolia. I've got a bag set up ready to go whenever you're ready. So thank you very much. Keep looking up, everyone. Take care, keep safe, and see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Balázs. Thanks, David.